Alright guys, I had to do a voiceover on the video because my phone kept vibrating when I recorded this and it sounded pretty crappy. So anyway, here's the top of the knuckle here. There's only one nut and bolt that holds the upper control arm to the actual knuckle. And that just comes in and out. You don't need to adjust it in any way. It doesn't affect the alignment. The other part of the upper control arm or parts are bolts that go onto the actual chassis of the vehicle. It doesn't need to be loosened. I thought I had to loosen it, but you actually don't. You don't need to remove anything with the fuel tank, like I said in my last video. That's just for other things you want to do, not the subframe. You really don't need to remove that. Here on the bottom of the knuckle, you'll see that there's a bolt there that's that's adjustable for the alignment. Here's the top bolt again on the top of the knuckle that goes to the upper control arm. And right here again, going back to the rear forward control arm, that's the one bolt, nut and bolt, that needs to be replaced. I definitely recommend it unless you could break your current one loose. And then here's the other one that goes onto the subframe. That's for the rear control arm that actually holds the coil spring. So that one you'll definitely need to replace, especially if it's seized in there with your subframe. You could buy all the parts still from Toyota. They're not hard to find. If they don't have it, I'm sure they can get it within a couple days. All the dealerships around me were able to get them with the same timeline. It only took one day to get them. But everything else on the subframe, besides the lower control arm, everything else on the actual subframe, it's either removing the differential from the subframe, which was pretty easy. It was just two 14, I believe they were 14 millimeter hex keys or hex sockets. And then the other four bolts were just bolts that went straight up into the chassis. The two front ones were pretty easy to access, so you were able to get a wrench on top pretty easily. There's plenty of room. The two in the back, a little bit more complicated. The driver's side, you can fit a wrench there, but it's kind of hard to hold it in place without damaging. You know, if you let go of it by accident, you could damage something around there, like one of the lines. I think there was some harness there or some hoses that went to the gas tank. I can't really recall now. But the passenger side, hardly any room. I do have there was the lines for the refrigerant that go to the rear AC unit. So that was another thing I didn't want damaged, of course. And take your time, you know, just spray everything down with some good PB Blaster, some WD-40. Let it soak, you know, if you have time, let it soak overnight and just come back to it, and hopefully you're able to get everything out pretty easily. So this here is the bolt that goes in through the sleeve here for the toe adjustment. So the bolt goes through here. This, as you can see, has 4 flat sides. Hopefully you can see that. 4 flat sides, and then the bottom is curved, and that's because it's going to go into this here, which is hard to mess up really. So it's going to go in there only one way, and then the bolt that goes all the way through the center is going to thread onto this. Make sure you put a generous amount of anti-seize in here, both on the bolts, so it can be inside the sleeve, and then on the outside of the sleeve, because this sleeve is going to be going through the actual subframe. And the bushing on the subframe, I hear, is a pain in the butt to remove. So luckily I got one that's in pretty good shape. But here are the part numbers for that. That's for the bolt, 90119-A0299. That's for the little bolts or the nut on the end, 48452-0C030. And then this is for the little sleeve, 48409-0C030. And now this is the one that's going to go underneath the knuckle. That one goes onto the rear forward control arm, onto the bottom of the knuckle. And this is just a simple bolt that goes all the way through. It looks like it has threads here, but it's not threading onto anything. This is actually just sitting inside the knuckle, like there's a little sleeve in there. So definitely put some anti-seize all over this as well, on the inside edge of this. This is not like the other bolts. This is just one straight bolt that goes through. This goes onto the bolts. As you can see, it's got two little things sticking out here, whatever you want to call them. So that way it only goes onto this bolt one way. And you might be able to install this thing correctly. I think it's able to. I'd have to check it out, but yeah, because the little grooves are right in the center on each side, they're not kind of offset. So, but as long as you have the bottom part that's aligning downward and not one up and one down, then you should be able to tell pretty easily. Now this here, let's see here, got 90178-18003, and that's for the actual nut that goes on that bolt. And then the adjuster is 48198-0C030. Again, that goes with this long bolt, and that goes underneath the knuckle, and this is a nut that goes with it. Hope this helps you guys.